They would talk about that night for years. The night a line of bikers walked through polished oak doors and taught a ballroom full of respectable people what true honor looks like. No one shouted, no one fought. The lesson arrived on quiet boots with 3 red roses, the soft rustle of a teddy bear, and the weight of a promise kept. And it began with a young woman almost everyone had failed to see. The Riverside Veterans Gala did not welcome surprises. Every November, the town gathered under chandeliers the color of warm honey-dark beams burnished by 100 winters and brass railings buffed to a mirror shine. White tablecloths were starched as Sunday manners. The band leaned into Sinatra and Glenn Miller. The mayor practiced his remarks beside a folding table where a faithful Mr. Coffee burbled next to sleeves of scuffed styrofoam cups that had survived every PTA meeting since '98. The silent auction smelled faintly of church basement pies, pecan and pumpkin, plus 1 apple with a handwritten label, Helen M. VFW Auxiliary. Old-timers from VFW Post 416 wore ball caps with pins that clicked when they nodded. Outside on River Street, the shuttered Lyric Theater's marquee still promised matinee 2 p.m. The town looked exactly the way it had always looked when it wanted to be seen. Lucy Harper walked in on her mother's arm. She was 22, brown hair brushing her shoulders, wearing a teal dress sewn at their kitchen table because the nicer stores in town didn't carry her size. Her father, Sergeant Tom Harper, a Marine, had died in service 14 years earlier. The gala had been his night. Margaret had circled the date in green on the fridge calendar the way you circle a memory you refuse to let fade. People noticed Lucy, but not in the way that counts. A waiter skimmed past her with a tray of sparkling cider and didn't stop. A couple leaned close to whisper their gentle smiles laid out like doilies. The master of ceremonies, a popular man from the local radio station, read a list of Gold Star families, skipped a line on his card, and never looked up. Lucy quietly raised her hand half an inch, just enough for the MC to see. He didn't. She let it fall, not in defeat, but like a bookmark saving her place for later. The band kept time. Shoes drew easy arcs on the polished floor. A woman in pearls laughed too loudly at a joke no one would remember. The chandelier threw gold across Lucy's cheekbones. Margaret squeezed her daughter's fingers and said that programs run long and names are easy to miss and next year would be better. Her words rose toward the ceiling and disappeared among the beams. Cruelty doesn't always scowl. Sometimes it wears a good suit and smells like expensive cologne. Sometimes it sounds like silence. The change began as a hum. It was faint at first, like a storm thinking it over in the distance. Conversations thinned. The saxophonist faltered. Someone near the doors said, "What on earth?" The sound gathered itself, engines steady as a heartbeat. Not the ragged bark of kids racing down River Street, but the braided rumble of riders easing off the throttle, out of respect for whoever lived behind the brick and glass. The oak doors swung open on a breath of November air that tasted of leaf smoke and iron. They stepped inside wearing leather and patience boots that didn't apologize for being boots bandanas, tied clean patches stitched in careful arcs. Their posture read like service shoulders, level eyes, calm backs, straight, without trying. The emblem on their vests said, Iron Brotherhood MC Veterans Division. They didn't swagger. They removed their gloves and tucked them into their belts as if they belonged in decent rooms, and always had. The first man was big-shouldered, bearded, the kind of man who could lift an engine block and set it down gentle. He carried 3 red roses and an old teddy bear whose stitched smile had softened with years. He found Lucy immediately as if someone had pointed the way. He did not look at the mayor or the donors or the photographer, angling for a picture that could be explained later. He walked toward the girl in the teal dress. His boots marked the measures the band had abandoned. 4 more riders followed at a respectful distance each, with something small, a velvet coin case, a jacket patch, a sun-soft photo of a young Marine under an impossible sky. Margaret rose her hand at her throat. Lucy stayed. The rider stopped at a distance that let both dignity and conversation survive. He knelt, not theatrically, but like a man lowering himself to where truth lives. "Miss Harper," he said. "Lucy." Up close, his eyes were kinder than anyone expected. Lucy nodded. "These are for you," he said, "from your father's brothers." 14 winters back, a blizzard shut down Highway 71. We were running a convoy to bring a wreath to a widow out past the county line. Ice took 2 bikes, a pickup slid. Could have been a pile of us in the ditch. Your dad pulled up in an old Chevy with a toolbox and a calm voice. He said flares blocked the wind-checked bones and bolts and told the rest of us to quit getting in the way. When we offered money, he shook his head. "You want to pay me back?" he said. "Remember my little girl, give her a good day when she needs one." We didn't know when that day would be. We figured we'd better show up on time. He offered the roses and the bear. Lucy re-centered the flowers on the nearest chair, turning the petals outward as if telling the room she wasn't hiding. She kept the bear tucked to her ribs like a heartbeat she meant to remember. The gray-templed rider opened the velvet case and placed a silver challenge coin in Lucy's palm, folding her fingers over it as if closing a little door to keep the heat in. The leader stood. "My name's Jack Rayner," he said. "Folks call me Bear. We're not here to make noise. We came to return what Sergeant Harper gave us dignity on a hard night, and to make sure his daughter is seen the way a Marine's daughter deserves to be seen, as a person with a name and a backbone, and a place at the center of the picture." The ballroom forgot how to pretend it wasn't listening. The MC stared at the microphone as if protocol might crawl out of it and save him. The mayor gave a small nod that wasn't leadership, but would do for permission. Bear took the mic with both hands, the way a man takes a folded flag. "We ride to remember," he said. "Most of us are Army or Marines, one stubborn Air Force mechanic who never met an engine he couldn't forgive. We brought a few things. If it's all right, we'd like to present them to Lucy." Margaret's yes sounded like air after a long swim. They set the faded photo of Tom Harper against the roses, and a drummer among them, as if by reflex, tapped a slow cadence on his thigh, the rhythm of men who remember and keep remembering. Lucy's fingers trembled, then steadied. Bear looked back to the crowd. "You can't teach honor from a dais," he said. "You show it when no one claps." A woman in pearls pressed a napkin to her lips. A waiter set his tray down and stood a little straighter. Near the back, the photographer raised her camera and lowered it again, unwilling to steal this one. Lucy lifted her chin. People who had been looking away found their eyes pulled back to the girl under the chandelier. "If there's a song," Bear said, "and if Lucy's willing, I'd like to ask for one dance, for her dad." Lucy glanced at Margaret, then made her choice. She placed the roses so she could see them, kept the bear, and reached for Bear's hand. The band leader, unsure what to play, hesitated. The drummer saved him. 2 sticks from a back pocket found a walking tempo. The piano settled under it, soft as a quilt. Bear didn't pull Lucy into a spotlight. He offered his hand and let her draw the size of the circle. She chose a small. He matched it. "Let's make a lane, Bear," said not loudly. 2 riders raised open palms. The room obeyed. Chairs scraped back. People who had been in the way learned how not to be. At the aisle's first turn, Lucy chose left, skirting a pillar, as if she'd walked the route 100 times in her head. She tapped 2 fingers against the teddy bear, matching the drummer's cadence, then smiled when he followed her speed. A 19-year-old server trying to be useful clipped the back of Lucy's dress with a tray. She startled. Before worry could grow a second head, the gray-templed rider caught the tray clean. Eyes on her. "Not your feet," the drummer murmured, and 3 strangers took the advice as if they'd thought of it themselves. A pair of donors who had planned their exit stayed. A woman who had spent the first hour measuring other women's dresses found herself measuring her own voice instead. The MC stood along the aisle, the microphone in his hand, eyes lost. He looked at the band, then at the riders, then at Lucy. 3 separate requests for absolution. Lucy lifted her chin again, not to judge him, but to choose her direction. She kept walking. The apology, if it was to mean anything, would have to learn her name before her story. Margaret circled to the end of the lane and waited in a small clearing by the bandstand, hands open. Lucy crossed the last few steps alone, the exact beautiful length of 4 heartbeats, and stepped into her mother's embrace. Bear and his brothers fell to the margins, visible enough to steady the picture, invisible enough not to become it. The band found America the Beautiful at a tempo that didn't require anyone to know all the words. The melody framed without stealing. The room remembered why it had come together in the first place. When the song ended, Bear set the mic on the stand like a borrowed tool. "Thank you for making a lane," he said. He meant it. The mayor lifted the microphone and looked at the card he'd rehearsed for a week. Then he folded it in half. "First we fix what we missed," he said, not as a footnote, as the point. The photographer framed the shot like the one she'd taken an hour earlier. Only this time, the center was a space left empty until Lucy and Margaret chose it for themselves. They did. The crowd formed rings around them, veterans volunteers from the Community Arts Center widows, and widowers, the high school color guard. Donors stood where donors should to stand, behind what matters. The shutter sounded like a lock turning the right way. The MC took back the microphone, not to smooth, but to own what he had done. "I arrange attention for a living," he said. "Tonight I arranged it badly. Lucy Harper. I'm sorry. I will do better starting now." The silence he received wasn't cold. It was acceptance. "We heard you." The gala chair, in a navy blazer, uncapped her pen. "Effective tonight," she said, "we establish the Sergeant Tom Harper Award, an annual grant for inclusive arts at the Riverside Community Center. $5,000 to start." Bear raised a hand to add without stealing. "Iron Brotherhood will match that this year and next if people stay at the center of the picture." The math looked good on the chair's face. It looked even better on Lucy's. "Please learn my name before my story," Lucy said, taking the mic just once. She gave it back like a borrowed cup. On her way to her seat, she held a chair for an older widow whose cane scraped the waxed floor. The small act fit the room like a key. Not every voice found the right pitch. A man who liked to chair things reminded the room about donors' dinner optics. The lane closed around his comment the way a town closes a door gently on a draft. The chair tapped the word amendments on a printed agenda and handed it to him. He sat and began to read. The band played a hymn slow, "You'll Never Walk Alone." The mayor walked to the back where a sign had said, "Photography VIPs," only peeled it off and taped a legal pad note in its place. "Photos welcome. Center space reserved for those we forget." It wasn't elegant, it was better. Bear offered Margaret a laminated card worn thin at the edges. "Tom kept this in his wallet," he said. A chaplain wrote it down for him. "In this house, we do not hurry those who carry a heavier load. We look them in the eye. We learn their names." Margaret traced the lines with her thumb as if reading in Braille. "Someone's going to ask you to serve on a committee," Bear said. "Two someones. Say yes to the one that remembers tonight, after the paper stops talking about it." "Which one will that be?" Margaret asked. "You'll know," he said. "It'll feel like work and not like theater." The men were ready to slip out before the moment turned into a photo op. Outside, under the sodium light, 5 V-twins idled red like coals in a good stove. Bear nodded to the mayor, shook his hand, like two people agreeing to share a job neither could do alone, and started for the door. The gray-templed rider paused, lifted 2 fingers in a quiet salute toward Lucy. She returned it imperfectly and perfectly. The engines answered their names one by one and settled into a patient idle. The riders eased away not in parade formation, but the way friends travel. Morning finds small towns honest. Without chandeliers and cards to read from Riverside, had to decide what it had become and what it wanted to be next. Frost stitched the grass behind Memorial Hall. The flag at the Veterans Square breathed slow. Lucy and Margaret walked the brick path past names that don't fade. Lucy wore a knit hat with a yellow palm, the honorary patch on a ribbon pinned to her coat. She carried the 3 roses like a message for a particular address. At Tom Harper's plaque, Margaret didn't cry. She'd learned when tears serve and when they steal. Lucy set the roses in a triangle, slid the challenge coin under the lowest bloom so it wouldn't blow free. "Hi, Dad," she said. Then, because last night taught her that names belong out loud, she added, "Hi, Tom." Bear pulled up in an old pickup and got out without hurrying up the morning. "Toy run 2 counties over," he said, hands bare to the cold. "Heard your art center's on the route now." "So they say," Margaret answered. Surprise hadn't worn off yet. Surprise keeps people from pretending they expected decency all along. "Your dad used to say honors like music," Bear told Lucy. "You feel it before you know the notes." "He did," Lucy said. "I told the room." Bear smiled with the corner of his mouth the way men do when they're pleased and don't need anyone to notice. He handed Margaret another copy of the chaplain's lines. "Keep it," he said. "Kitchen wall." He didn't promise to keep in touch. Promises only work when the road between them is real. He tapped his brow and left them to the morning. News outran the paper. A new photo began traveling phone to phone, Lucy and Margaret at the center. The town ringed around them like a wreath. No banner across the bottom, no sponsored logos, just faces. In kitchens, a few people saw their own and forgave them. Then dialed numbers that began about next year. The Memorial Hall Committee posted a note that did not smell like a starch. We missed what mattered and were kindly shown where to stand. The Sergeant Tom Harper Award will be part of the gala every year. The center of the photo will be reserved for those we forget if we don't try. If we forget again, please teach us again. At the radio station, the MC stared at the red on-air light. Last night we hosted a perfect gala, he said, and let 3 seconds of dead air bloom. That's the story I would have told yesterday. The true one goes like this. He told it. He said Lucy's name. He named his mistake so it couldn't own him. He read the chaplain's lines as his new sign-off between the weather and the obituaries. The woman in pearls took the rhinestone pin she'd slipped into a basket and sold it, brought the cash to the art center, didn't ask for a receipt, with her name on it, and left with a little paint under her nails from rinsing jars in the back sink. At home, she folded 3 sweaters she'd saved for the right party and put them away. The right party had already happened. At the dinner table, the 19-year-old server told his mother he'd nearly spilled a cider on a girl in a teal dress and that a biker had caught the tray without breaking a glass. His mother said, "So in the way people do when they're tired from closing the store and hope their sons will find the moral themselves." He said, "So I think I watch people like they're obstacles." She set down her fork and let the sentence be the important thing in the room. The mayor convened the board, same hall, same table, different agenda. He started with an apology and a list, a rotating advisory panel of families from the community center, volunteer training that doesn't sound like training, a camera at child height to show what a room looks like when you're not tall enough to be counted, budget lines with names next to them so money can be held accountable too. The board didn't nod politely. They asked questions whose answers meant work. That's how everyone knew they meant it. At dusk, the art center propped open its blue door. The director pinned up a new sign, lettered by a teenager with steady hands, "The Tom Harper Curve, where we make a space before we need it." The word curve came from Lucy's sketchbook pages of roads that widened at corners of lanes that bent to let 2 pass at once, of paths that curled back to pick up anyone left standing. Lucy brought her sketchbook to the long table and drew, while Margaret filled cups cut paper and learned the names of kids she hadn't met, because she'd been busy standing between the world and her daughter. A little girl chewing her sleeves asked if she could have a motorcycle. Lucy drew a big simple one with 2 circles and a seat like a smile. The girl drew exhaust that looked like music. The high school color guard showed up with folded tables. "We can help," their captain asked. They learned that service is mostly lifting, where someone tells you the weight lives. On the bulletin board, a volunteer sheet hung under Toy Run. Empty lines are invitations. By closing time, they had names. Someone pinned up the chaplain's lines with a doodle of a small bear listening. Across the river on Route 6, the Iron Brotherhood kept their promise again. The way promises prefer to be kept, a stop at a grocery with a giving tree, a handshake with a store manager who had once played football badly and learned it had been good for him, that he wasn't the star drop-off at a church basement where a woman in a sweatshirt sorted dolls and trucks with the efficiency of someone who considers grace a kind of logistics. They stayed long enough to know where the boxes went and left before they turned into a photo. Weeks later, the award would be handed out at a council meeting not with trumpets, but with the modest clap older Americans trust. The first recipient would be the art center. The second would be a middle school bus driver who'd been stopping 5 minutes early for years to walk one student with a heavy backpack the last block to a door with a tricky latch. Anyone surprised by that choice hadn't been listening. None of it fixed everything. The world stayed the world complicated as weather, but the night had tilted the town, and the morning let it settle into a truer place. People found themselves catching small trays before glasses fell. They made lanes without waiting to be told. They discovered that honor didn't need a ballroom to be taught, only a room where someone was willing to learn. That evening, Margaret read the words Lucy had pinned above her desk, then kissed the top of her daughter's head, which had never stopped being a small world entrusted to her care. Outside, far down River Street, a motorcycle rolled past at the speed courtesy chooses. Its sound folded into the dark like a bookmark where a town had stopped reading so it could start again in the morning at the right place. Honor isn't a speech, it's the lane you make before someone needs it. We make space before we need it. We look people in the eye. We learn their names. We leave the door open when we go.